Good afternoon. This is Carol again from the First Presbyterian Church, and this is our story time. If you remember last week, we were reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.W. Lewis. And in the first chapter, I explained a couple words to you, and I'd also like to do the same for the second chapter. There are two phrases: the son of Adam, which means a boy, and the daughter of Eve, which means a girl. So when you hear me say those phrases in the book, think of a boy or a girl. If you remember, at the end of the first chapter, the children were exploring in this old house that they were staying in. And Lucy had found herself in this large room with only a wardrobe in it. She decided to go in that wardrobe. When she went in the wardrobe, it was summertime. But when she went out on the other side of the wardrobe, it was winter. And she ran into a strange looking creature that from the waist up looked like a man, but from the waist down appeared to be a goat with a long tail. And he was carrying a couple of parcels which he had dropped. And we called him a fawn. So I would like to begin reading the second chapter of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for you. What Lucy found there. "Good evening," said Lucy. But the fawn was so busy picking up his parcels that at first he didn't reply. When he finished, he made her a little bow. Good evening, said the fawn. Excuse me, I don't want to be so inquisitive, but should I be right in thinking that you are the daughter of Eve? My name is Lucy, she said, not quite understanding him. But you are, forgive me, you are what they call a girl, said the fawn. Of course I'm a girl, said Lucy. You are, in fact, human. Of course I'm human, said Lucy, with a little puzzle. To be sure, said the fawn. How stupid of me. But I've never seen a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve before, and I am delighted. That is to say, and... Oh, he stopped, as if he was going to say something that he had intended, but then he remembered in time, just in time. Delighted, he went on. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Thomas. I am very pleased to meet you, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. And may I ask, O Lucy, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Tumnus, how have you come to Narnia? Narnia? What's that? Said Lucy. This is the land of Narnia, said the fawn, where we are now. All of this that lies between the lamppost and the great castle of Claire Parvel in the eastern sea, and you have come from the wild woods of the west. I thought I came through a wardrobe in the spare room, said Lucy. Ah, said Mr. Tumnus, in a rather melancholy voice. If only I had worked harder at geography when I was a little fawn, I sure no doubt would know all about those strange countries, but it's too late now. But they aren't countries at all, said Lucy, almost laughing. It's only back there, at least I'm not sure. It was summer there. Meanwhile, Mr. Thomas, it is winter in Narnia, and it has been for a very long time, and we shall both catch cold if we stand here talking in the snow. Daughter of Eve, from the far land of the Spar and the eternal summer rains around the bright city of the wardrobe, how would it be if you come and had tea with me? Thank you very much, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy, but I was wondering whether I ought to go back. It's only around the corner, said the fawn, and there'll be a roaring fire, some toast, some sardines, and some cake. Well, it's very kind of you, said Lucy, but I shan't be able to stay long. If you will take my arm, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Tumnus, I shall be able to hold the umbrella over us, and away off we go. And so Lucy found herself walking through the woods, arm in arm with this strange creature, as if they had known each other for a very long time. They had not gone far before they came to a place where the ground became rough, and there were rocks all about, and little hills going up and little hills going down. At the bottom of one small valley, Mr. Tumnus turned suddenly aside as if he were going to walk straight into an unusual large rock. But at the last moment, Lucy found it was leading into an entrance of a cave. As soon as they were inside, she found, blinking in the light, was a wood fire. And there Mr. Tumnus stood, and he took a flaming piece of wood out of the fire with a neat little pair of tongs, and lit the lamp. Oh, now we shan't be long, he said, and immediately he put the kettle on. Oh, Lucy thought she had never been in a nicer place. It was dry, clean cave with a reddish stone, and a nice carpet on the floor, and 2 little chairs. One for me and one for my friend, said Mr. Tumnus, and a table and a dresser and a mantelpiece over the fire with a picture above it of an old fawn with grey beard. In the corner there was a door which Lucy thought might lead to Mr. Tumnus's bedroom, and on one wall there was a shelf full of books. Lucy looked at those while he was setting out the tea things. They had some strange titles like The Life and Letters of Silenus or Nips, and Their Ways, or Men, Monks, and Gamekeepers, A Study of Popular Legends, or Is It a Man, or Is It a Myth? Now, daughter of Eve, said the fawn, and really it is a wonderful tea, and there was a nice brown egg, lightly boiled, for each of them, and then sardines and toast, and then buttered toast, and toast with honey, and there was a sugar-topped cake. And when Lucy was tired of eating, the fawn began to talk. He had wonderful tales to tell of the life in the forest. He told about the midnight dancers, how the nymphs who lived in the wells and the dryads who lived in the trees came out and danced for the fawn, about long hunting parties after the milk-white stag, who, if you caught him, your wishes would be granted, after feasting and treasure-seeking with the little red dwarfs in the deep mines and caverns far beneath the forest floors. And then about summer, oh, when the woods were green and old Silenus on his fat donkey would come to visit them. Oh, and sometimes Barcus himself, and the streams ran with wine instead of water, and the whole forest gave itself a jollifications for weeks on end. Then, to cheer himself up, he took out from its case of the dresser a strange flute, and he looked as if it were made of straw, and he began to play. And the tune he played made Lucy, oh, it made her want to cry. And then it made her want to laugh. And then it made her want to dance. And then it made her want to go to sleep. Oh, all at the same time. It must have been hours later, and she shook herself and said, "Oh, Mr. Tumnus, I'm so very sorry to stop you, but I do love the tune, but really, I must go home. I only meant to stay for a few minutes. It's no good now, you know," said the fawn, laying down his flute, shaking his head as if he was very sorrowful. "No good," said Lucy, jumping up and feeling rather frightened. "What do you mean? I've got to go home at once. The others will be wondering what happened to me." But a moment later she asked, "Mr. Tumnus, what is the matter?" For the fawn's brown eyes were filled with tears, and the tears began trickling down his cheeks, and soon they were running off the end of his nose, and oh, they covered his face, his hands, and he just began to howl. "Oh, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Thomas," said Lucy, in great distress. Don't, what is the matter? Aren't you well?" "Mr. Thomas, please tell me, what is wrong?" But the fawn continued sobbing, as if his heart would break. And even when Lucy went over and put her arm around him, she lent him her handkerchief, but he still didn't stop. He merely took the handkerchief and kept on using it and wringing it out with both hands to get the wetness out, and then making it wet all over again. So presently Lucy was standing in a puddle. "Mr. Tumnus," bawled Lucy in her ear, shaking him, "do stop. Stop at once. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. A great big fawn like you. What on earth are you crying about?" Oh, said the Mr. Tumnus, "I am crying because I am a bad fawn." "I don't understand. I don't think you're a bad fawn at all," said Lucy. "I think you're a very good fawn. You are the nicest fawn I've ever met." Oh, you wouldn't say that if you knew," replied Mr. Tumnus between sobs. "No, I'm a bad fawn, and I don't suppose you'd ever saw a worse fawn since the beginning of the world." "But what have you done?" said Lucy. "My father now," said Mr. Tumnus, "that hid his picture over the mantelpiece. He would never have done a thing like this." "Like what?" "I've taken service under the White Witch. That's what I've done. I am in the pay of the White Witch." "The White Witch? Who is she?" "Why, she is that has got old Nanya underneath her thumb. It's she that makes it always winter, and never Christmas." "Think of that! How awful," said Lucy. "But what does she pay you for?" "Oh, that's the worst of it," said Mr. Tumnus with a deep groan. "I'm a kidnapper for her. That's what I am. Look at me, daughter of Eve. Would you believe that? I'm the sort of fawn to meet a poor innocent child in the wood, the one that never done me any harm, and pretend to be a friend with it, and invite him home into my cave, for all the sake of luring in asleep and handing it over to the White Witch." No, said Lucy. "I'm sure you wouldn't do anything like that." "But I have," said the fawn. "Well," said Lucy, rather slowly, for she wanted to be truthful and yet not to be too hard on him. "Well, that is pretty bad. But you're so worried for it that I'm sure You will never do it again. Daughter of Eve, don't you understand? Said the fawn. It is something I have done. I am doing it now, at this very moment. What do you mean? Cried Lucy, turning quite white. You are the child, said Mr. Tumnus. I have orders from the White Witch that if I ever saw the son of Adam or the daughter of Eve in the wood, I would catch them and hand them over to her. And you are the first I have ever met, and I have pretended to be your friend and asked you for tea. And all the time, I've been meaning to wait until you fell asleep, and then I would go and tell her. Oh, but you won't, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. You won't, will you? Indeed, indeed, you really mustn't. And if I don't, he said, beginning to cry again, she's sure to find out, and she'll have my tail cut off, and my horns sawn off, and my beard plucked out, and she'll wave her wand over me, and my beautiful hoofs, well, she'll turn them into horrible hoofs like that of a wretched horse. And if she's extra specially mad, she'll turn me into stone, and I shall only be a statue of a fawn in her horrible house until the 4 thorns of Claire Pavard are filled, and goodness knows when that will be, or whether it will ever happen at all. I am very sorry, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy, but please let me go home. Of course I will, said the fawn, of course. I've got to go. I see that now. I haven't known what humans were like before I met you. Of course I can't give you up to the White Witch. Not now, not that I know you, but we must be off at once. I'll see you back to the lamp-post. I suppose you can find your way from the lamp-post to the spare room and the wardrobe. Oh, I'm sure I can, said Lucy. We must go quickly as we can, said Mr. Tumnus. The whole wood is full of her spies. Even some of the trees are on her side. They both got up, and they left the tea things on the table, and Mr. Tumnus once picked up his umbrella and gave Lucy his arm, and off they went out into the snow. The journey back was not at all like the journey to the fawn's cave. They stole along as quietly as they could, without speaking a word, and Mr. Tumnus kept to the darkest places. Lucy was relieved when they reached the lamp-post again. Do you know your way from here, daughter of Eve, said Tumnus. Lucy looked very hard between the trees and could just see the distant patch of light, like the daylight. Oh, yes, I see the wardrobe door. Then be off, home quickly as you can, said the fawn. And can you ever forgive me for what I did to you? Why, of course I forgive you, said Lucy, shaking him heartily by the hand. And I do hope you won't get into dreadful trouble on my account. Farewell, daughter of Eve. Perhaps, may I keep the handkerchief? Oh, rather, said Lucy, and she ran towards the far-off patch of daylight as quickly as her legs could carry her. And presently, instead of the rough branches brushing past, she felt the coats. And instead of the crunching of the snow under her feet, she felt the wooden boards. And all at once she found herself jumping out of the wardrobe into the same empty room from which she would have adventured had started. She shut the wardrobe door tightly behind her and looked around, panting It was steadily rain, and she could hear the voices of the other in the passageways. "I'm here," she shouted. "I'm here. I've come back. I'm all right." The end of chapter 2. Thank you, and have a great week.